flint knapping. Making stone tools was one of the first things humans figured out how to do. The process is called flint knapping. You take two rocks and hit them together until one of them becomes a knife. The problem is that when you do this, sharp flakes fly off in every direction at high speed. They are made of obsidian or flint, which are basically natural glass. Prehistoric skeletons have been found with these fragments embedded in the hands, the forearms, and sometimes the face. One skeleton found in France had obsidian flakes lodged near the eye socket. Nobody can say for certain if that is what killed him. The bone says yes.
Struck by lightning.
Lightning hits the Earth about 100 times every second. Ancient hunter-gatherers spent most of their lives in open landscapes with no shelter and no warning system. Being caught in a storm in the open was genuinely dangerous, and the people who figured this out did so by standing in the wrong place.
The practice of sheltering in caves during storms exists across nearly every ancient culture. It did not come from a theory. It came from watching what happened to people who did not shelter. A modern person struck by lightning knows exactly what hit them. An ancient person watching it happen had no word for it, no explanation for it, and no way to make sense of it. They just knew that the person standing next to them was suddenly dead.
The cave bear.
The cave bear was not a predator by nature. It ate mostly plants. It also used caves for shelter in winter, which was the same reason ancient humans used caves. This overlap happened for tens of thousands of years. Several Neanderthal skeletons have claw and bite marks on the arms and shoulders, consistent with bear attacks. Some of those marks had healed. The person survived and presumably found a different cave. Some had not healed. A cave was good shelter from the cold, from rain, and from most other threats. It was less useful as shelter from the large animal that had already decided the cave was its. The Toba eruption. 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano on the island of Sumatra erupted. It was the largest volcanic eruption in the last 2 million years. The eruption sent nearly 3,000 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere. Ash covered South Asia, parts of East Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. Sunlight was blocked for years. Temperatures dropped across the planet. Plants stopped growing. Genetic evidence suggests the global human population fell to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 people. The entire species reduced to the size of a small town. Nobody caused it. Nobody predicted it. The sky went dark, and most of the people who had ever lived were gone. The bog. Peat bogs across northern Europe have preserved hundreds of ancient bodies in near-perfect condition. The chemistry of the bog stops decay. Hair, skin, and facial expressions survive for thousands of years. Some of these are accidents. Bogs look exactly like solid ground covered in moss, until the moment they are not. Others are not accidents. Many bog bodies show signs of multiple fatal injuries and careful placement afterward. The Toland man, found in Denmark, had been hanged and placed in the bog deliberately. His face was so calm that the officers who found him in 1950 initially treated it as a recent murder case. He had been in the ground for roughly 2,400 years. The Graubuly man is so well preserved that forensic artists have produced detailed portraits of his face. Infection from a small wound. Today, a small cut gets cleaned and forgotten about within a week. In the prehistoric world, a small cut was the beginning of a situation. There were no antibiotics. There was no understanding of why wounds got worse. There was just the wound and then what the wound decided to do next. Bone infection shows up constantly in prehistoric skeletons.
dark patches in the tissue where bacteria spread from the surface down into the bone itself. A Neanderthal found in Iraq, known as Shanidar 1, had a healed arm amputation that other group members likely performed. He had multiple serious injuries and probably could not see out of one eye. He lived into old age, which means his group kept him alive. Not everyone had a group like that. Some people did not make it past the infection. The mammoth hunt. Hunting a woolly mammoth was a group activity because one person alone had no chance. The strategy was to drive a herd toward a cliff or a bog and let the terrain do the rest. A mammoth weighed between 4 and 6 metric tons. Its tusks could reach 4 meters long. When the herd panicked, it did not panic in a direction that was convenient for anyone nearby. Prehistoric skeletons from this period show crushed ribs, shattered leg bones, and collapsed spines. Some of these injuries had healed, which means the person survived and went back to doing it again. Some had not healed.
Childbirth.
Women of childbearing age in prehistoric populations died at significantly higher rates than men of the same age. This pattern shows up consistently across Neolithic burial sites. Human brains grew larger over millions of years. The pelvis did not grow at the same rate. This made human birth mechanically harder than it is for almost any other mammal. Without medical help of any kind, this difficulty was simply the normal condition of reproduction. At a Neolithic site in Germany, a woman was buried alongside twins, both positioned as if mid-birth. The grave was around 5,000 years old. Objects had been placed around her carefully by whoever buried her.
Otzi the Iceman. In 1991, 2 hikers in the Alps found a body melting out of a glacier. They assumed it was a recent accident. The body was 5,300 years old. The man, now known as Otzi, was so well preserved that researchers could identify his last meal, his parasites, his DNA, and his medical conditions. He had hardening arteries. He had gallstones. He had injuries on his hands that were beginning to heal. What killed him was an arrowhead lodged under his left shoulder blade. It had cut a major artery. He was dead within minutes. The arrow had been fired from behind, at close range. Someone followed him into the mountains and shot him in the back. The case has never been solved.